Buenos
Sorry
días a
about that
todos.
small interruption
Soy
in the
la
beginning.
señora Camilo
Good
Aparicio,
morning to all of you.
profesora
I am Dr.
de
Camilo
Procinorte
Paricio
y pues es un gusto
from
darles la
Procinorte,
bienvenida
and
a
it is a
este
pleasure to give you the
taller.
warmest
Veo
welcome
además que tenemos
to this workshop.
pues un
And
nutrido
I see that we have,
público desde diferentes países,
well,
así que
very
me da mucho
so
gusto y les agradezco
we are very pleased with
enormemente
that,
su interés por conectarse.
and we thank you for your
Para
interest
quien no
to,
nos
to
conozca,
participate in this.
Procinorte es
For those of you
una
who do not know us,
plataforma de
Procinorte is
colaboración
a
entre Canadá,
platform for
Estados
cooperation
Unidos y
between
México
Canada, the United States, and
que
Mexico
busca fortalecer la
that is
cooperación
aiming
en
to
investigación e
enhance the
innovación
cooperation in research
agroalimentaria en temas
and
de interés
innovation
común
in
en
agro-food
bastantes países y
systems
que opera bajo
and
el auspicio del Instituto
topics that are of
Interamericano
interest
de
to three
Cooperación
countries
para la
and that operates
Agricultura, el
with the
IICA.
sponsorship of the
En ese
IICA, the
contexto,
Inter-American Institute for
el grupo de
Cooperation in
trabajo en
Agriculture.
recursos
On this
genéticos que
context, the
llamamos
working group
NORGEN
in genetic groups that we
desempeña
call the
un papel
NORTEN
fundamental al promover la
is
conservación
playing
y
a
uso
fundamental role
sostenible de
in
la
promoting the
biodiversidad agrícola,
preservation and the
así
sustainable
como
use of
al
the
fomentar la
agricultural diversity,
colaboración entre
as well as to
especialistas involucrados
promote
en los
the
sistemas
cooperation between
nacionales
specialists
de
that are
recursos
involved in the
genéticos
national
de la
system
región
of
norte de
the
las
systems of
Américas.
the northern region of the
Enseguida le voy a
Americas.
pasar la
Following,
palabra
I'm going
a
to
quien
give
es
the
el
floor
investigador, representante en
to who is
Canadá
the
y líder de
researcher
este grupo,
and
el
representative
doctor
of Canada and
Diderichsen,
the leader of this group,
pero
Dr.
él puede hablar, es
Dick
mucho más y
Dieterson,
mejor del trabajo
but he
de,
can
de
talk
este
a lot
grupo
more
que
and a
yo.
lot better
Entonces les
about
voy a
the work of
compartir
this group.
rápidamente
But before
unos
that, I would like to
avisos
share with you very quickly
básicos. En primer
some
lugar, la
logistic
sesión cuenta
aspects. First of
con
all,
un
the
servicio
session
de
has
interpretación simultánea
the
en inglés
service
y español,
simultaneous
así que
interpretation in
pueden
English-Spanish,
seleccionar el
so you can
idioma de su
select the language of
preferencia
your
en el
choice
menú inferior de
in the
Zoom
menu that is
en
at the
el
bottom of the
icono de
screen where there is a
interpretación.
globe that says
Durante la
interpretation.
sesión vamos a estar
During the
compartiendo
session, we're going to
mensajes de
be
interés
sharing
a través del chat
a message
y
of
ustedes también
interest
pueden
through the chat
dejarnos mensajes y comentarios para
and
nuestros ponentes. Habrá una sesión
for
de
comments
preguntas y
to our
respuestas al
presenters. There
final.
will be a session
Trataremos de
of questions and
multiplicar
answers
que
at the end.
respondan
We will
la
try to have
mayor
our
cantidad de
presenters to
preguntas
respond
posibles
as many
y
questions
para
as
ello es muy
possible.
importante que siempre
And
pongan
for
a
them,
quién va
it is
dirigido
very
su
important that you
comentario
always
o
put
su pregunta.
the
Y por
comment
último,
or your question
tanto la
in the comments.
grabación de toda esta sesión como
And
las
finally,
ponencias que estén
for
finalizadas y
the
las
management of this
presentaciones se compartirán
session,
la próxima
the
semana en
presentations will
nuestra
be
website.
shared next week
Dicho
in the
eso,
website of
muchas gracias a
Prosegur.
todos por acompañarnos.
Having
Esperamos
said
que la
this,
sesión sea de
thank you to
interés y
all
de
of you for
provecho
being
para
here with us, and we
todos.
hope that this
Y
session will be
doctor
very useful to
Diderichsen,
all
le
of us.
paso la
And
palabra
Dr.
a usted, por
Dieriksen,
favor.
the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Dr. Aparicio. Good morning to everybody. Thank you to the Secretariat, to the translators. Thank you to the speakers. Thank you for the participants in this webinar, which it's organized by the Norgine Task Force on Genetic Resources. We have the representatives from the United States, Dr. Neha Kotari, and we have the representative from Mexico, Dr. Juan Manuel Hernandez Casillas, with us. And we decided, we had the idea that we wanted to do this on corn, maize, a very important crop, a very interesting crop. It's one of the big cereals, wheat, rice, and corn. Interesting. One from the Near East, one from Asia, one from the Americas. These are the very important crops. Major producers are US, China, and Brazil. It's very, very versatile, you know, human nutrition, animal nutrition, biofuels, very broad adaptation, extremely broad adaptation, recently even moving north in colder climates due to breeding. Origin in South Mexico, spread already 5,000 before Christ, spread to Peru very quickly, and after 1492 to the Old World. It's very interesting. It's one of the key genetic resources from the Americas. We also slipped in one presentation on cacao, which actually came from Ecuador and then moved north to Mexico, Mesoamerica. Unfortunately, in Canada, we won't be able to grow cacao, at least not in the next future, but it's very interesting also to hear about that. With that, I will continue. I tell you, I will watch the time strictly, because we cannot overgo the time limits. I learned that the introductions of the speakers will be placed on the chat, so you can read that up. So without a lot of flowers or flourish, any other flourish words, I ask our first speaker, Dr. Adam Mahan, to start with his presentation. Thank you. And allowing me to interrupt. So then I come to the next speaker, which is also the representative of Mexico to the Task Force on Genetic Resources, Dr. Juan Manuel Hernandez Casillas. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Buenos días a todos.
Well, good morning to
Se
everyone.
ve mi
And can you see
presentación.
my screen? Can you see
Sí,
my
doctor, lo estamos
presentation?
viendo.
Yes, doctor.
Ok.
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
En esta ocasión vamos a hablar
Well, in
algo
this
sobre los
occasion, we'll
maíces
speak a bit
de
about
México.
Mexican maize.
Voy a tratar de
And I will
mostrarles
try
o
to show
comentarles
you or
acerca
to
de la amplia
discuss
diversidad
regarding
de
the
los maíces
array of
mexicanos.
diversity
Como
of
ustedes saben,
Mexican maize. And
México es
as you know,
centro de una
Mexico
diversidad
is a
de
center
maíz.
of origin and
En estos
diversity
lugares
of
tenemos
maize.
alrededor de
In these
50 a
locations, we
60
have close to
razas
50 to
de los
60
diferentes maíces.
different breeds of
Toda
maize.
esta diversidad de
And all
maíces se
this
encuentra englobada
diversity of
en lo
maize
que es la
is
biodiversidad,
encompassed
que
in
abarca la
the
variabilidad
biodiversity
entre todos los
that
organismos
includes
vivos.
the
Pero
variability of
centrándonos
all
en lo que
living
es la
organisms,
diversidad
but
del
focusing on
maíz,
the
que es
diversity
la
of
diversidad
maize,
genética
which is the
de,
genetic
de
diversity
cultivos,
of
podemos
crops.
decir
We
que
can say
México
about this that
tiene una amplia
Mexico
diversidad
has a
de maíces.
broad
Podríamos también
diversity of
mencionar
maize.
que
We can also
prácticamente
mention
en
that
toda la
pretty
República
much
Mexicana
throughout
se tiene
Mexico,
maíz, se
there
siembra
is
maíz,
maize, there's
existiendo algunos
corn being
lugares
produced,
donde la
with
concentración
some
de la
places
diversidad
where the
es más
concentration of
amplia, como por ejemplo
diversity is
Chiapas,
bigger. For
Oaxaca
instance,
y
in
algunas
Chiapas,
partes norte del país,
some parts of the
tenemos
north of
una
the
mayor
country,
diversidad
we have greater diversity
prácticamente en todo
concentrated
el
there.
país.
But pretty much
Tenemos
throughout the
diferentes
country,
maíces,
we have
diferentes colores,
varieties of maize, varieties
diferentes
of colors,
adaptaciones a los rangos de altura
various
y
adaptations
algo muy
to
importante,
heights, and
muchos de
something
estos
very important
maíces
because
se
much
encuentran
or many of
viviendo
this
en áreas
maize variety
ecológicas
are
muy
being produced
particulares,
in very
lo cual les
specific
permite
ecological
desarrollar
areas that
características
allow them to develop
muy
characteristics
especiales.
that are very
Esto va
specific
unado a
and
lo que es
together with
los grupos que las mantienen.
the
Toda
groups that
esta
support these.
diversidad
All this
podríamos
diversity,
decir que es una
we can say,
evolución bajo
is
domesticación.
an
Si
evolution,
bien hay diferentes
domestic
teorías para
evolution.
el
Although
origen
there are
del
various
maíz,
theories
una
for
de las
the
más
origin of maize,
fuertes es
one
que el
of the
maíz proviene de
strongest of these is
Teotihuacán.
that
Y
maize
en
comes
México
from
existe diferentes
Teocintle
poblaciones de
in Mexico. In
Teocintle
Mexico,
que
we
están
have
conviviendo con
different
maíz,
populations
lo
of
cual
Teocintle
permite un
that live with
entrecruzamiento
maize, that allows
entre maíz y
a
Teocintle,
crossing between
generando diversidad
this
que los
Teocintle
agricultores pueden
maize,
seleccionar o
generating the
pueden no
diversity
seleccionar, lo
that
cual
farmers
va
can
a
choose or
moldear
not,
estas
which
diferentes
starts
razas que
molding
tenemos
these
en México.
different breeds we have
Eh,
in
si
Mexico.
nos preguntamos el porqué de esta
If
amplia
we ask
diversidad en
ourselves
México
why this
es
broad
porque
diversity in
las razas
Mexico, and
primitivas
this is
son
because
cultivadas
primitive races,
todavía
breeds are
en
still
diferentes
being
lugares de
produced
México,
in
lo
different
cual,
places of
como
Mexico.
sabemos, tiene una
And as
polinización
we all
abierta
know,
y
has
que
open
permite el
pollination,
entrecruzamiento.
which allows
La
the
ocurrencia de variedades
breeding.
exóticas
The
también es
occurrence of
otro
exotic
factor
varieties
importante
is
de esta
also an
diversidad,
important factor in
cruzamiento
this
natural entre
diversity,
teocintle y maíz,
natural
y algo muy
breeding
importante,
between
la
Teocintle
geografía
and
del país,
maize. And
que
something
es
very
bastante
interesting, which is the country's
accidentada, que
geography,
promueve
which
la
is quite
diferenciación entre tipos climáticos y
variable, which
sistemas
allows differentiation
agrícolas de
between
producción.
climate types and
La amplia diversidad
agro
también de
production
grupos humanos,
systems. Also,
los
the
cuales
wide variety of human
ejercen
groups, uh, which
fuerza de
cause
selección
a selection
igual o más fuerte que
force equal or stronger than the environment, uh, producing different corns according to their use type and adaptation, and many times according to their religious belief. We can also mention that in the diversity of people we have 60 indigenous groups in Mexico, which all of these and each one of these has the selection, consumes, and produces maize in different ways, which, as I was saying, this produces a big force of selection to mold the different types of maize that exists in Mexico.
All this broad variety is very important, but it also offers us a challenge as to how to manage it, how to preserve it, how to maintain these different breeds, these different populations with their own characteristics. And in this sense, the term race has served us a lot. Race is those in which a group of individuals and populations that share common characteristics of morphological and type, genetic, and crop that allow them to differentiate as a group. The races, they are also clustered in racial complexes. And how does this help the preservers of this diversity? This helps us to determine the sites in which we can regenerate these uh, conditions. As you know, the preservations of these diversities in banks or deposits with refrigeration or low contents of humidity allow longevity for the seed. But throughout time, these seeds will eventually die. So it is necessary to refrigerate them. So when we have differentiated or classified all the different exceptions of different breeds or races, allows us to make a distribution that is more assertive of the place where they might be adapted and that we might obtain seeds from. On the other hand, I think that it's always important to have diversity, but I think that it is also maybe more equally important to use this diversity. From the Mexican corns that we have in the banks of germplasm, but much of this material is also held by the producers who have kept them uh, because of their adaptation to the environmental conditions that are very specific, and also by the way in which they consume them or use them. We can also say that this great variety of corn, we have them in the deposits or banks, the germplasm banks, and in the hands of the producers. In the germplasm banks, we have the great diversity that we have in Mexico, where we have places that are very specific with conditions that are very special that have not been collected. But if we talk about diversity that is observed in the germplasm banks, we can say that we have more than 80% of the diversity that we have in the whole of the country. Nevertheless, that diversity that is in the hands of the producers has also been evolving and it has been selected. And there are genotypes and populations that are very important that we have to preserve also in germplasm bank. And on the other hand, not everything is just to give ourselves praises and say that we have a great diversity in Mexico, because we have very important challenges to be able to maintain that diversity. In the last jobs of collection and characterization of the materials, we have noticed that the majority of the races that are described that were described in 1950s, 1940s in Mexico are present on the field in the majority of the the areas where they were produced. And we can say that uses with the higher production of technology or use of technology have less priorities. And on the other hand, the persistence of these native materials differs from one country to another. We could say that in the north and the center, they're mainly improved material, but in the southern part, in the center of Mexico, the majority are native materials or materials that are Creole in materials. On the other hand, the regions with the best areas of access and communication are fragile in preserving this diversity. From one year to another, from one cycle to another, we might have the loss of these materials. And something that is alarming is that the preservers of diversity are very advanced in age. And another thing that is not written here, but that we have also observed, is that the age, the youth, the new generations are not staying on the field. They are not bound to a material, and it is very difficult for the continuity of these diversities to continue on taking place in these places. What do we have then in the germplasm banks? In the plant banks, we have approximately 70,000 sections that represent basically everything that we have, the materials in Mexico, and some from Central and South America. We have approximately 50 different races that are represented in these number of exceptions. The sessions come from different stratus and different ways of consumption. In other words, we have diversity and adaptation and the use. And something that is also very important, it is a genetic diversity that is linked to knowledge and old ancestral knowledge. This knowledge is what has allowed us that to this day we might be able to continue on preserving these materials in the hands of the producers. Not only corn, maize as such, are we interested in preserving it, but I think that the wild relatives are also a source of diversity that are very important. Although they have not been used very broadly to this date, they are a reservoir that can be used in the future, dedicating time to these type of materials. On the other hand, the improved materials are also a genetic resource that has to be preserved. And of course, varieties that are not planted at this moment that should be preserved as sources of genetic diversity in corn. On the other hand, how much of this diversity do we have on the fields? And a collection in Mexico begins in the 1950s. Then in 1970, we did another collection. And the last one was done in 2007, 2009, which we noticed that practically all the diversity that described in the previous collections, it was still valid. It was still maintained with the producers. Many of these, and some of the places with a fragility that might very easily disappear. But the banks, we still had this diversity. I believe that there is not a country or there is not a bank in which we might be able to preserve all the diversity of the crops, and especially all the diversity that is required in each one of the countries to be able to create that bank. So these banks, one way or another, because of their capabilities, because the resource to be able to preserve this diversity, it is something that is always going to be suffering problems. So we think that what must be preserved, we should maybe prioritize the diversity that we're going to maintain. And within that priority, we consider that the accessions that have very important characteristics currently have to be maintained. Also, those accessions with a wide range of genetic variety wild relatives of those crops, obsolete uh, accessions, and the alternatives that present good traces, and also the threatened races. I think that preservation is something that is important, but also we also think that what is not used is not going to preserve. So I think that we have to balance the preservation, but we also have to put into priority the use of this germplasm. So what would be the best strategy for preservation of this diversity? I believe that in the banks we should be ensuring to have the collection as complete as possible. Of that diversity that is at risk, we should preserve it in the banks, and not only to preserve it, but also to guarantee its viability. This, not all the banks are in condition of guaranteeing a viability of everything that is preserved. So it is interesting to look for resources to maintain that viability. On the other hand, we also have to promote and make strategies for preservation that will guarantee that this is maintained in the hands of the producers. We have to make it accessible and also profitable that the producers might find it attractive to preserve the varieties, the native accessions of the corn, of the maize. So therefore, the collections that are maintained in the germplasm banks are important, but we have to look for strategies of preservation whose that might be complementary to these two types of preservation. I believe that only one, as such, will will make it very difficult to be able to guarantee the prevalence of the native mazes. So I think that a more assertive way is to have the complementarity of these two types of preservation. On the other hand, the way of use of these materials has been maybe not extensive to all the races. If we take into account that we have 50 to 56 races, very few have been used in programs of improvement programs. The chronic calcaño, the chronic elotes, or cobs have been used in the high valleys. The Celaya, Tuxeña, Bolita, Conijo Norte have been used in the intermediate places, and the Tuxeño and the Bandeño have been used in the tropical areas mainly. On the other hand, why has this diversity not been used? Because the programs for improvement is easier to manage lines and populations of open populations and races. Another thing is that we don't have enough knowledge of the diversity that's preserved. We have to we have the shortage of characterization. We don't have data of evaluation, and of course, data for the quality of each one of these materials is lacking or short. We're short of that. So therefore, we also have to promote the use. We have to seek that more of this germplasm is used in the improvement, that it might also work as an introduction of diversity into places where there have been abandonment or there has been a catastrophic event that made this diversity get lost. The support of the humanitarian movements for the preservation of the germplasm, the investments in characterization and evaluation is important if we want a bank to be active and to use studies of evolution, the patterns of diversity. I think that this last one can be one of the factors that can join efforts between Canada, United States, and Mexico. Each one of us going for their own types of maize and their use. Other characteristics of the maize that have a potential for improvement, well, maybe the programs for improvement in Mexico, the United States, Canada have always been looking for a greater yield. I think that there are also characteristics related to the kitchen or corners of speciality that we should look for. For example, these are some of the characteristics that come about from some of the materials in Mexico that are very interesting and that we know can be useful for the use of this germplasm. Pozole is used by with races such as cacahuatil, ancho, tabloncillo, for different types of consumption. For tortillas, we normally use. We think that all of the corns are important, or you can make a tortillas out of them. Nevertheless, pepitilla, rosillo, bolita, pececillo is giving us an exceptional quality in tortillas. Of course, there are some races that you might make popcorn out of. Some forms of consumption, like tlayudas, or for the bolita race, or totopos, or for the chico zapalote, the grande zapalote. The pinole, which is a beverage, can be made out of a navajeño, cristalino chihuahua. For frying, we can use the blue and the crystal from Chihuahua. The obtention of dyes can be used from corn, cone corns in blue. And these are some of the characteristics that can be used by some of the races that can give an added value to our materials and that they might make it even more interesting for the producers to maintain them. Other characteristics is that are very little have been little studied is different germplasms adapted to different systems of crop production, genetic diversity that can face climate change, something that is very much discussed. If we have diversity, we can face the different changes that might come with the climate change. More efficient materials, physiological processes, efficient use of water and nutrients. I think that these materials have special relevance. The water factor is almost something that is going to be very important, and that is very important now in Mexico and probably in the United States also, is that we have less water to produce. We have to look for materials with characteristics that will require less water to come to the solution. There are different ways of how to attack the use of this germplasm, but one of them is the formation of the nucleus collections that can help us identify where the genetic diversity is, and to identify emptiness gaps in the use of the germplasm. And on the other hand, the food research is never going to be forgotten. We have to continue on producing better materials to feed a growing population. It is necessary, and it's going to be undeniable, the use of new germplasm. If the climate change is going to continue on modifying the weather, we have to be ready with materials that might respond better to this climate change. The more characterized and evaluated we have the germplasm, the better will be their use. The production of food and quantity is fundamental, but we also have to start looking for germplasm that will produce quality food. On the other hand, to generate germplasm for restricted areas, for areas that have low rainfall, that have low nutrients on the soil, that might be physiologically better, sorry. And of course, what was being mentioned previously, the selection and development of germplasms for specialty germplasm is a good option for the diversification of the production. And this, since this is dedicated and we are looking at the needs of our country, I think that it is also something that might be interesting to be able to open markets in other parts of the world. So therefore, the preservation, the study, and the uh, maintenance of the genetic diversity is always going to be important to generate products that are more equal to what the consumer wants, and to make also a rescue of the traditional uses that this germplasm might have. That is all on my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Exactly on time. Very interesting to hear from the Center of Origin and Diversity of this crop, and very impressive images. I see there are quite some questions in the chat in Spanish. Again, I encourage you to respond to them, maybe in the chat. Otherwise, we will come back to them at the end. We had foreseen to take a break now for 10 minutes. So I suggest we do that. And it's now 9 minutes left. And then, so my watch shows we have 10:30. And we were very sharp on time, which is good. And I assume you are all here now. So then I have the pleasure to ask Dr. Carlos Hugo Vendano Arrastre to give his presentation on cacao genetic diversity. Thank you. Please.
Muchas gracias. Sí, eh,
Thank you very much. Yes.
¿me pueden comentar si se ve bien?
Can you see my presentation okay?
Gracias.
Yes, everything fine. Thank you,
Muy buenos
doctor.
días. Vamos a platicar
Good morning.
sobre la
We're going to
conservación
talk
y uso de la
about the
diversidad
preservation
genética del
and the
cacao
use
mexicano.
of
El
genetic
cacao,
diversity of the Mexican cocoa.
un cultivo muy vinculado
The
al maíz,
cocoa, that is a crop that is very much
centro
linked
de
to maize,
domesticación, México como centro de
uh,
domesticación
and
del
Mexico is the center
cacao y
for
centro de origen, ya nos
domestication
comentaba
of the cocoa
el
and the center
doctor
of
Juan
origin,
Manuel Hernández,
as Dr. Juan Manuel Hernandez
centro de
was
origen
already
del
talking about the
maíz.
center of origin
La
of the
verdad es
corn.
que este
Well,
cultivo
the truth
no
is
solo
that
es el
this
ingrediente
crop
del chocolate,
is
sino
not
es
only the
historia,
ingredient of
cultura,
chocolate,
economía
but
y
it is
sobre todo
also history,
resistencia
culture,
ante
economy,
estos fenómenos
and
de
persistence
de
in
cambio
view of those
climático
phenomena
que está
of
viviendo
climate change
no solo el norte
that
de América, sino
we're going
todo el
through not
mundo,
only
¿verdad?
the north
Entonces,
of America,
quiero
but
comentarles
all throughout the world.
brevemente
So
cuál es
I
el
would like to comment
panorama
very
a nivel
briefly
mundial.
what is the scope
Aproximadamente
worldwide
se cultivan, se producen
about
más
we produce approximately
4.84 millones de toneladas para el
4.84 million
2025,
tons
pero
for
lo que
2025,
representa para la cantidad de
but what
productores,
it
que es muy
represents
similar, de
for the amount of
5.5
producers
millones de pequeños productores
is
que viven de este
5.5 the
cultivo,
small million
siendo
producers that are
Costa de Marfil
that live from this
el
product, being
principal productor
Ivory
de
Coast, the
cacao a nivel
main producer
mundial.
of cocoa worldwide.
Y algo muy interesante ha
And
pasado en los últimos
something
dos
that is very
años.
interesting has
Costa
happened
de
in the last
Marfil
couple of
de
years.
producir
Ivory Coast
2.4
from
millones de
producing
toneladas. El año pasado
2.4 million
produjo
tons.
1.8 toneladas por
Last
defectos
year, it
de
produced
sequía y
1.8
esto hizo que se disparara el precio del
million
cacao
tons, and
de
this
3.000
made the price of
dólares
cocoa
la tonelada a
rise
doce
from
mil dólares la
dollars to a
tonelada.
ton
Esas
to
son las repercusiones
$12,000
que
a
están
ton.
teniendo los
These are the
efectos
repercussions
de cambio
that
climático. Se espera que
the
ya para
climate
este
change
año haya una
effects are
recuperación de
happening.
la producción
We
de
expect
estos
that this year there
países
will be
y
a
entonces
recovery of the production of these countries.
esto hace que
So
establezcamos
this
estrategias
makes
que nos permitan
makes us
una
be able
mejor
to establish
utilización de
strategies
esa
that will allow
diversidad.
us a
En
better use of
México,
that
en realidad,
diversity. In
son pocas
Mexico,
las hectáreas comparado
it is
con la
very
cantidad
few hectares
de
that we have
hectáreas que
compared
se
to the amount
produce en Costa de
of
Marfil,
hectares
en
that are
América
produced
Latina, en
in
el
Ivory
caso
Coast and in
de
Latin America.
Brasil,
In the case of
Ecuador.
Brazil,
México ocupa el
Ecuador,
14º lugar con
Mexico has the
apenas
14th position
52 mil
with
hectáreas y
only
una producción de 28
52,000
mil
hectares of
toneladas,
production
haciendo esto
in a production of
que tengamos una
28,000 tons.
importación más del 60% del
So
consumo
we
nacional.
have an import
Entonces,
of more
vean
than
ustedes
60% of national
las
consumption.
variedades que se
So
cultivan en México,
please take note
menos del
that the
20%
varieties
de
that
los
are
productores
produced in
cultiva
Mexico, less than
variedades
20% of the
criollas de
producers
cacao.
produce
La edad de las
Creole
plantaciones
varieties
bajan
of
más de
cocoa.
25
The
años.
ages
Si lo
of the
vemos desde un punto de vista
plantations
productivo, pues no es
exceed
rentable
the
desde
25
el punto
years
de
of
vista
age. And if we
genético.
see it
Qué
from the point
bueno
of view
porque
of
tenemos
production, it
mucha
is not profitable.
diversidad
And from
para
the
los
genetic point of
programas de
view, that's wonderful because
mejoramiento.
we have a lot
La
of
edad de los
diversity for the
productores,
programs for improvement.
más de
The age of the
60 años,
producers,
para nosotros
60
es
years
una
or
ventaja
plus.
porque hay mucho conocimiento sobre el
For us, that is
manejo y
an advantage because
conservación de
there is
la
a
diversidad,
lot of knowledge
pero
about
sí lo que es
the
un
management
problema
and the
real
preservation of
son las
diversity, but
enfermedades como la
the what is
monofiliasis.
the
Vean,
real
apenas
illnesses.
podemos ver un
The
fruto,
illnesses like the
todo lo demás
moniliasis, look,
se
we
ha
can barely
enfermado.
see one fruit
Entonces,
here,
¿qué está
and the rest of it
pasando? ¿Cuáles
has
son las consecuencias? El
sickened
abandono, la
here.
baja
So what
rentabilidad,
is
el
happening?
cambio de cultivos y sobre
The
todo la
abandonment, the
pérdida
low
de la
profitability, a
biodiversidad
change of
que
crops, and
tenemos.
especially
Ahí ven los
the
árboles de
loss of
cacao
biodiversity that
utilizados
we have.
como sombra para
There we can
pasar
see
la
the cocoa
reproducción
trees used
de
as
animales. ¿Cuáles son los retos?
shade for the
Principalmente
production of animals.
aprovechar la
What are the challenges?
biodiversidad de
Well,
manera
mainly to take
sostenible,
advantage of the
incrementar la
diversity in a
productividad,
sustainable manner,
mejorar la calidad de vida
to
de los
increase the
productores, pero
productivity
también
and to improve the quality
contribuir
of life
a
of the producers,
equilibrar
but also
la
to
cadena de
contribute
valor.
in balancing the
Vean,
value
en
chain.
México
And
tenemos más de un
notice
millón de
that in
hectáreas, según estos estudios,
Mexico,
con el
uh,
potencial
uh,
productivo de alto
we have more than
rendimiento.
1 million
¿Y qué
hectares,
tenemos? ¿Qué
according to the studies, with
tenemos
a
en
high
México? En
possibility
esta
of
lámina ustedes pueden ver la diversidad de los tres
yield.
grandes
And what do we have in
grupos
Mexico? Well, in Mexico,
genéticos
we
de
can see
cacao, el criollo
the diversity of
nativo,
the three
los
great
comunitarios y los
groups of
forasteros, que
cacao in
vamos a
Mexico. We
tener
have the
una amplia
Creole, the
gama de
native,
colores,
and
sabores, formas,
and
texturas
and we're
y
going to have
variedad
the
que
shapes,
pueden ser
forms, textures,
aprovechados no solo para el tema
so that
del chocolate, sino en el tema
we can
nutracéutico,
use this not only for chocolate but
farmacéutico,
also for the
cosméticos, ¿verdad?
nutritional, pharmaceutical.
Entonces, ¿qué estamos haciendo desde
And
UNIFAP? Pues la promoción de los cacaos criollos mexicanos diferenciados
what are
a
we doing
través de la
meanwhile? Well, the production
investigación,
of the cocoa,
desarrollo e
Mexican cocoa,
innovación,
differentiated through
y
the
que
development of
hemos,
in research,
con la
and that
colaboración
we
de
have been
diferentes instituciones, hacemos todo el trabajo de caracterización
able to, with the characterization
morfológica,
of all the institutions,
molecular,
we have
pero
done the
algo muy
morphological
interesante es la
and the molecular, but something
bioquímica-sensoria,
very interesting
debido a la trazabilidad que le
is
debemos
the
de dar
biochemistry and
a estos
sensorial,
materiales
due to
de
the possibility
cacao
that we
que
have of giving
están
these materials
dando ciertos
of cocoa
aromas a chocolate
that are
gourmet,
giving
los
certain
perfiles de
aromas to
ácidos
gourmet
grasos,
chocolates.
¿verdad?
The profiles of
Esos
fatty
perfiles
acids,
sensoriales
those
chocolate que nos
sensorial
hace
profiles of those
sentir
profiles
chocolates
maravillosos
that
that
después de
make us
give
tomar
us a
uno o
marvelous
10
day
great
gramos
after
day
de chocolate.
after
discussing at
trying
least.
Entonces,
10
¿qué
grams of
estamos
chocolate. So, what are we
trabajando, aprovechando
working on?
esta
Well,
diversidad para la
making
generación
use
de
of this
nuevas variedades
diversity
de
to
cacao?
generate new
Esta es
varietals
una de
of
las
cocoa.
estrategias que hemos
And this is
usado
one of the
dentro del programa de
strategies we have
mejoramiento
used in
genético
our genetic
del
breeding
cacao en
program
México,
in
en grandes
Mexico,
rasgos, que va desde la
a very high level
recolecta, los
from
bancos de
collection,
germoplasma, la
the
caracterización,
germplasm
procesamiento, selección.
banks,
Utilizamos diferentes
breeding.
métodos
We
de
use
mejoramiento.
different
Pueden ver
breeding
estas
methods.
estrategias, los hemos
And as you can see
catalogado
in
dentro
these
de la
strategies,
recolecta, la
we have
evaluación de cacaos criollos, el mejoramiento
collections,
participativo, el
characterization,
programa que
evaluation,
tenemos de cruzamientos, registro y
participated
protección de
breeding, a very
variedades
strong
y
program,
transferencia de
register
productores.
and protection of
Ahora
varietals, and
bien,
transfers
nos hemos dado
to
la tarea desde
producers.
los
And we
ochentas con
have
la
then,
recolecta de
since the
cacaos
80s,
criollos en todo
with
lo largo y
the
ancho de las
native
zonas
cocoa
donde se
collection
cultivaban
in
cacao.
all these
Aquí
areas
podemos
where
ver,
this
estos son
cocoa is
algunos
produced.
ejemplares de
These are
cacaos que
just
están
some
en la selva La
examples
Caldona.
of
Nos hemos dado la
cocoa in the
tarea de
forest
entrar a
in La
buscar ese
Caldona.
cacao
We
nativo.
have gone
Aquí
in there to
estamos
find that
en
native cocoa.
Yucatán, en uno de
Here
los
we're in
cenotes
Yucatan,
sagrados donde
one of
estaba la
the
ruta café de los
sacred
mayas, que
cenotes
tenían
in the
mucha
Maya
diversidad, entre
routes
ellos
that had great
los cacaos,
diversity,
¿verdad?
where they had great
Otras
diversity of cocoa
características. Y una vez que
and
obtenemos estos
some other
cacaos, los llevamos a los
characteristics. And
bancos de
once we have these
germoplasma.
cocoa
El cacao es una
types, we take
especie
it to
recalcitrante
germoplasm
que
banks.
necesita
It's a
ser
species that
conservado en vida.
requires
Entonces, si no lo
conservation
podemos hacer a través de la
live. If we
crioconservación,
cannot do
también hemos
it through
desarrollado métodos de
cryoconservation, where we
crioconservación.
have developed some cryoconservation
Tenemos que mantener el
methods, if we
árbol
cannot do that, we have to maintain the
tenemos las
tree
muestras,
alive.
una
Here we
amplia
have some
diversidad de
samples
cacaos
and
criollos
a
que
wide
tenemos en
variety of
UNIFAP,
native cocoa
¿verdad?
we
Pero
have
sobre
in
todo,
Linifat,
esto nos ha permitido
Inifat, and this has allowed us
apoyar
to
para
support
la conservación y sobre todo
conservation,
protección a través de
especially
la
the
generación de los
protection through
descriptores varietales
generating
para
varietal descriptors
para el
for
registro de estos materiales.
the
Algo de la caracterización
registry of this
bioquímica donde
material.
estamos
Some of the
trabajando los
biochemical
diferentes tipos
characterization
fenotípicos y
or
algunas cuantas
specification where we're
especies
working in
como
different
Pterophroma bicolor que está ampliamente
genotypes like
distribuida en
Pteroma
México,
bicolor, which is
nos ha
widely
permitido
through
pues
Mexico,
distinguir
has
las
allowed us
regiones entre
to
Tabasco, Chiapas,
distinguish the
Oaxaca,
different regions
Veracruz,
with
Guerrero,
Tabaco,
que es
Chiapas,
de
Veracruz,
las zonas donde
Guerrero,
se
which
distribuye
are the areas
principalmente
where
el cacao. Y
this
la
cocoa is
caracterización
mainly
molecular nos ha
distributed.
permitido
And the
también para
molecular
generar esos
specification,
programas
this
de
helps us to
crecimiento
generate
que nos
these
han ayudado a
breeding programs,
obtener
which have allowed us
materiales
to
tolerantes a la
obtain material
moniliasis.
that is
Este
tolerant
es
to
uno de los resultados que
moniliasis.
hemos tenido
This is
a
one of the
través
results we
de
have had
selección de
in
cacaos
our assessment
criollos
and
y que
selection of
también
native
lo
cocoa,
hemos acompañado
where we have
en los
also
tratamientos
supported
participativos.
this with
En ese sentido,
participative breeding.
quiero
And in this
comentarles,
regard, I
¿verdad?,
would like to
que
say
la estrategia
that
de
the
mejoramiento participativo
strategy
que hemos
of
usado en el cacao
participative
en los
breeding we have
últimos
used in
15 años,
cocoa in the
pues es
latter
introducir
15
mantener
years
diversidad
is to
genética
introduce and
en estos
maintain
sistemas locales
genetic
aprovechando
diversity in
los
these local
agricultores el
systems
desarrollo,
using
adaptando y
from the
adoptando nuevas
farmers
variedades.
the
Entonces,
developing
ha
development
sido
and
muy intenso
adapting new
este
varietals. So it's
proyecto
been a very
que hemos
intense
trabajado con productores de
project. We have
Chiapas
worked with
y Oaxaca.
farmers in
Aquí estamos
Chiapas and
realizando el
Oaxaca.
programa de
Here
mejoramiento
we are
participativo.
sharing
Se
the
definen las
participative breeding
características de
program.
interés por
We
parte de los
define the
productores,
characteristics of
llámese calidad,
interest of the
rendimiento,
different
tolerancia,
farmers.
sequía,
You can see quality,
y damos
aroma,
este
yield,
trabajo de
droughts,
selección en
and
cada una de
we
las
work
parcelas
the
donde los
selection
productores y
process
nosotros nos
in
vamos
each one of the plots
incluyendo
where
en esta
farmers and
selección
we
y etiquetado
contribute in
de
this
los árboles de
selection
interés.
and
Una
labeling
vez
of trees
tenemos
of interest.
seleccionados, pues
And once
procedemos a
we
hacer
have
la
these selected,
caracterización in
we
situ
go ahead
para ver qué
and
tenemos y
perform
sobre todo
on-site
también la evaluación
classification
de
and
pruebas de
mainly
resistencia
the
genética
assessment of
asociadas al
genetic
rendimiento. Pues
resistance
vean, este es uno
testing
de los árboles,
related
es
to a
GP01
yield.
de
This is one of
Saúl
the trees,
González Pérez,
SGP01,
orgulloso
Saul
de que
González
hemos
Perez.
encontrado uno de sus
He is very
materiales
proud that
tolerantes a
we found in his
moniliasis y
material that tolerant
de
to
alto
moniliasis
rendimiento.
and of
Este
high
también, vean ustedes,
yield.
otro
Here
material
you can see
muy
other
interesante.
material,
Tenemos
which
a don
is
Samuel
very
Guillén,
interesting. We have
muy,
here
muy
Samuel Guillén. He
participativo.
is
En
very
paz descanse don
participative
Samuel
and
Guillén,
he
pero ha
passed
sido un
away, Samuel
forjador,
Guillén, but he's been
conocedor
a
de la diversidad
pioneer,
del cacao, que nos ha permitido,
connoisseur
vean, ahí
of
estamos haciendo
diversity of
las pruebas de
cocoa. And you can
resistencia a
see
través
him
de cámaras
doing
húmedas para
resistance
ver que
testing
el
with
cultivo
wet
efectivamente
chambers to
es
make sure
la
that the
resistencia
crop
genética y no ambiental.
has
Entonces,
the
hacemos todo
genetic
un
resistance and
procedimiento,
not
¿verdad?,
environmental.
de
So
las
we
pruebas in
conduct all this
situ. Aquí
procedure of
vean,
on-site
hemos
testing. Here
injertado
you can see
cacao
where we
seleccionado por el
grafted,
productor, cultivado por
selected
nosotros
a
en
cocoa
un
with the
porta
producer, with
injerto
our
altamente
support, in
susceptible
this
que se llama Robo
highly
Samuel, es un
susceptible
cacao
graft
criollo,
type,
y
Robo
hemos
Samuel. It's
injertado
a
nuevo
native cocoa,
material
and
que
we
hemos
grafted
seleccionado
this
para
with the
su
new
tolerancia
material
a la
we
moniliasis y
developed for
posteriormente la
tolerance
evaluación
to
en diferentes
moniliasis. And once
ambientes,
again,
y eso pues
testing
nos ha
in
permitido
various environments,
seleccionar
and this has allowed
diferentes
us to
tipos de
select
cacao
different
a
types
través
of cocoa
de esta estrategia que
by
nos
means
permite
of this
reproducir
strategy,
también
which allows
mucha
us to
diversidad en los sistemas
reproduce great
agroforestales de
diversity
cacao en los
in
últimos 40 años.
the
Además,
cocoa
tenemos un programa de
agroforestry
selección
systems.
que iniciaron
Besides
en
that,
los
we
años
have a
80,
selection
¿verdad?
process that
Donde
started in the
nosotros
80s,
seguimos
in
evaluando
which we
estos
continue
materiales
evaluating
forasteros,
this
en particular
forest
UF
material,
273
specifically
por PA
UF273
139,
and
dos
PIA
materiales
179,
tolerantes a
these
moniliasis,
two
y que nos han
monolysis
permitido
resistant
también
materials,
obtener
which have allowed
materiales
us to obtain
tolerantes a
a
moniliasis de alto
tolerant
rendimiento,
to
pero algo
monolysis
también muy importante,
material,
el
but
sabor
something
y
very
aroma.
important, which
Y
is
otra
taste
generación
and
de
aroma.
cruzamientos
And
que hemos
another
llevado a cabo
generation of
con los
breeding we have
materiales del
conducted
catie
with
y
the
los cacaos
Catie
criollos
material and
mexicanos que
native
se caracterizan
Mexican
por tener
cocoa, which
un
is
buen
characterized by
rendimiento, pero muy
having a good
susceptibles a
yield,
enfermedades.
but very
Entonces nos ha permitido, ¿verdad?,
sensitive
obtener de
or
estos materiales de
susceptible
sangre
to
criolla
disease. So
y
it has
sobre
allowed us
todo
to
por
obtain
calidad de
this
aroma,
material
que es algo que
with
pide el mercado a
native
nivel internacional. Este,
genotype
nuevos materiales. Aquí
and
tenemos
to obtain new
estamos
material.
en
Here,
este año ya evaluando
this
híbridos
year, we
rosa
are
doble,
assessing
donde
hybrids,
procuramos,
dual
¿verdad?, tener
breeding hybrids
buen porcentaje de
where
sangre
we
fría y
hope to
sangre forastera
obtain
para
high
calidez,
percentage of
calidad aromática
uh,
con tolerancia
a local
a,
genotype that
a
will
las
allow us to have high
moniasis y
tolerance
fitóptora, que son las
to
principales
moniatis and
enfermedades
phytophthora,
del
which are
cacao
the
en México.
main diseases
También vean
of
ustedes,
cocoa
aquí
in
estamos
Mexico. Here you can
viendo
see
todo el
we
procedimiento
here
una
we can
vez
see
que
all
hemos hecho la
the
prueba de
complete
evaluación en
procedures.
campo,
One we have
ya
conducted
llevamos a los
on-site
productores,
assessment. We
evaluamos
then
en
go to the
diferentes
farmers.
ambientes,
We do testing
establecemos
in
los jardines
various
clonales. Esto es muy
environments. We
importante para
establish
la
cloning
distribución
gardens.
y
This is very important for
propagación
the
masiva
distribution and
de estos
mass
clones, ¿verdad? Y
spreading
luego
of these
procedemos a
clones.
la
And
protección
then we
legal
go on to the
de estos
legal
materiales a través
protection
de
of
el
this
SNF,
material
que
through
es el
a
modelo de low
sniff
pop
that
con
use
los
the long
títulos de
pop
obtentor,
model
¿verdad?
with
Vean,
the
aquí tenemos el
these
lacandón obtenido por selección,
certifications
el KN3
obtained by
obtenido por
selection,
cruzamientos y el
K3
regalo
by
de Dios
breeding,
obtenido como
and
encaballamiento
God's gift
participativo,
obtained by
donde el
participative
productor se
breeding,
queda todos los
where the
créditos también
producer
en este
receive
proceso de
all
obtención.
credit
Y por
in
otro
this
lado,
process.
también
On the other
hacemos el
hand,
registro de
we
variedades de uso común.
also
Vean esa
register
gama de
the
cacaos
common
criollos
use of
que hemos
varieties of native
registrado en
cocoa
el catálogo de
that
la
we
Asociación de
have
Variedades
registered
Vegetales
in the
con
national
el objetivo
catalog
de hacer
of
la
plant
trazabilidad
varietals to
de
be
estos
able to
materiales.
trace
Esto es
these
muy importante
materials.
tener
And this
la
is very
trazabilidad y el
important to
origen del
have the
material
traceability
para la
and the
producción de
origin of the
chocolates de
material
alta gama.
for the
Y eso es
production
a
of
donde queremos
high
llevar a los
variety
productores.
cocoa. And
Una vez
that's
que
where we want
tenemos
to take
todos estos
our
materiales,
farmers. Once we have all this material,
tanto en el campo experimental como en
in
las
the
parcelas de los
experimental
productores,
field as well in
empezamos
the
a hacer todo
farmers'
lo que es la
plots,
transferencia
we
a los
start with
productores,
the
¿verdad? De otra
transfer to
manera,
the producers, to the
estos
farmers.
clones se quedarían en
Otherwise,
los campos
these clones would just
experimentales. Aquí
remain in
pueden
these
ver a los
experimental
productores.
fields.
Aquí
But
estamos
here
en el
you can
campo
see
experimental,
the
pero aquí está
farmers.
el
This is
señor
an
Eder
experimental
López Herrera.
field. But
Ya en
here
las
you can see
parcelas
Eder
donde
Lopez
están
Herrera.
validando ellos los
He's in a
materiales,
plot where they're
están adoptando
validating the
estos
material
nuevos
and
materiales.
they're adopting
También trabajamos
this
con ellos los diferentes
material, these
modelos de
materials. You also
plantación donde
work with them
metemos
on different
densidades,
planting
tipos de
models
sombra,
where you
tipos de
talk about
poda,
density,
¿verdad? Que le permita
types of
mejorar
shade,
la
types
rentabilidad
of
del cultivo.
pruning that will
Y
allow
algo
them
muy
to get better
importante para
yield of
mantener
their
la
product.
calidad
And something very
del
important to
cacao
maintain the quality
hacia el
of
chocolate es
cocoa
precisamente
and
el
then
manejo post
becoming
cosecha
chocolate
y los
is the
subproductos. Aquí
post-harvest
pueden ver,
management of
tenemos todo un
byproducts.
programa muy
Here you can
fuerte
see we
para
had a very
tratar
strong
todo lo que es
program
fermentación y
is
secado
everything
y la
related to
elaboración de
fermentation,
subproductos como
drying, and
kombucha,
the creation of
salsas,
products like
que le dan
kombucha,
una
sauces
revalorización
that
o
give a new
permitir la entrada
value
a la
or
economía
that allow
circular.
the
Ya se
entry
había
of these
platicado,
products to
el doctor
circular
Hernández Casilla
economy.
mencionaba de
Dr.
que los
Casillas
jóvenes
mentioned
ya no
that
quieren ya estar en
young
el
people
campo
no longer
y
want to be in the
efectivamente no es
field.
rentable para
And
los
yes, in
jóvenes
fact,
ahora
it's not
con
profitable
todo lo que
for
gastan
young
y
people with
tenemos
all they have to invest.
estrategias de
So we do
gestores
have
locales para
strategies
promover la
of
inclusión
local managers to
generacional,
promote
¿verdad? Donde tiene
generational
que ir el
inclusion,
papá y
in
los
which
hijos
the
y
father has to
nosotros los
be there with the
preparamos desde
children
la
and
colecta,
we prepare them, we
establecimiento de
train
jardines
them
clonales
from
y
collection,
certificado y todo el
establishing
proceso de
clonal
producción hasta la
gardenings,
transformación. Ahí
grafting,
pueden
all the
ver
production,
este
all the way
también
to
el trabajo que tenemos
transformation. You can see it's an
para
ongoing work we
esta
conduct
estrategia de la
for
inclusión
this
generacional
strategy
y
of
la formación de
generational inclusion,
técnicos,
and
¿verdad? A
then
través del
training
Programa Nacional de
technicians with
Acompañamiento
our
Técnico en
national
Cacao,
technical
que nos
support
ayuda,
program in
¿verdad?,
cocoa,
a ver esa visión,
which helps
conservar,
us
pero
to have
también
that
utilizarlo. Y
vision
de esa
to
manera,
conserve, but
la
also
cadena de
to
valor
use. And
nos
this
va a
way, the
permitir
value chain will allow us
equilibrarlo. ¿Por qué? ¿Por
to
qué buscamos un
balance all of
equilibrio en
this.
la
And why
cadena de
do we
valor?
pursue a
Porque
balance in the
necesitamos
value
que
chain?
no
Well,
solo sea
because we
6%
need
de toda la
it for
ganancia, de
not
todo lo que
only
se
to be
produce en la cadena de
6%
valor,
of all the
es lo único
profits
que llega al
of the value
productor.
chain. That's the
Entonces
only thing that
proponemos
reaches
modelos como el
the
de
producer. So
chocolate de
we
la tierra a
propose
la barra,
values,
donde se
programs
incluye
like chocolate
todo un
from
desarrollo local,
a
¿verdad?
soil to the
Una
bar that
sensibilización
promotes
del consumidor
local
final para que
development,
podamos estar trabajando con
awareness of the
paisajes
local producers
sostenibles,
to work with
la conservación de la
sustainable
fauna
landscapes, with
silvestre, que están
conservation
muy
of
vinculados a los
wild
sistemas
fauna, which
agroforestales
is very related
de
to the
cacao en
agroforestry
México. Entonces,
systems of
ahí es donde
cocoa
estamos
in
promoviendo
Mexico.
este
That's
modelo
where we
donde busca el equilibrio en todos los sentidos entre el medio
promoting
ambiente, el
this
árbol del cacao,
model
el
that
productor, el
finds a
desarrollo
balance between
local,
the
el
environment,
chocolatero
producers, local
y el
development,
consumidor.
chocolate
Entonces,
producers,
¿qué
and
buscamos, verdad? ¿Qué es
consumers. So, what is it that we want
esas
to
oportunidades para México.
to
Vean, el
seize.
cacao
What
criollo tiene
opportunities
aroma,
for
es
Mexico?
muy valorado
Native
en los mercados
cocoa, good
europeos.
aroma,
El
is
chocolate
very high
artesanal
valued in
orgánico
gourmet
presenta
markets.
demanda en Europa, Japón,
Artisanal
Estados Unidos.
chocolate and organic,
Entonces,
it has a growing
para que
demand in
nosotros
Europe, Japan,
podamos
and the US.
tener
So
hasta
for
cierto grado
us
esa
to have
repetibilidad y
a
esa
certain level of
calidad
that
que nos
repeatability of
hacen
those
sentir que el
chocolates
día
that
es
make us
maravilloso,
feel that it's a
tenemos que tener
marvelous
la
day,
trazabilidad.
for
Y es
that we
allá
need
donde
to
les
have
vamos a
traceability.
los
And
productores y a
that's
las
where we
productoras
take
a través de
farmers,
estos
male and
materiales
female,
genéticos
through
diferenciados,
this
manteniendo y
genetic,
conservando y utilizando
differentiated
esa,
genetic
esa
material,
diversidad a
maintaining
través del
that
turismo rural y
diversity
cultural
through rural,
y las
cultural
innovaciones
tourism
en
and
bebidas fermentadas,
innovation in drinks,
cosméticos
fermented
naturales,
drinks,
suplementos
cosmetics,
nutricionales
natural
y el
products,
sistema de producción
nutritional
forestal,
supplements,
que
and
son los
forest
que están
production
siendo
systems,
resilientes
which
ante
are
el cambio
the ones
climático.
that are being
Muchísimas
resilient
gracias.
before climate change. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Avandano Araste. Again, I notice you made it ahead of time. I'm very impressed. So maybe again, we can take an oral question, or there are questions in Spanish. They are not. Maybe someone wants to translate them and read them out. Or anybody
Doctor,
listens.
doctor
Yeah.
Avendaño, ¿puede usted ver
Dr.
las
Avendaño,
preguntas directamente en el chat?
can you see
Si
the
quiere puede
questions
contestar
in the chat?
directamente alguna de
If you
ellas.
see them there, you can go ahead and answer one of the questions
Ajá.
directly, Dr.
A
Avendaño.
ver.
But please translate the question first to English that everybody can understand. Maybe some of the translators, if they can see it, they just read the
Dice,
question.
¿qué tipo de
Well, it
tecnologías o
says, what type of
herramientas se
technologies or
utilizan para
tools
mantener
are
y
used
evaluar la
to
diversidad genética
maintain
en los
and
sistemas
evaluate the
locales?
genetic diversity in local
Pues los
systems? What type of
conocimientos que
tools?
tienen los
Well, the
productores y
knowledge
por ahí
of the
veía una pregunta
farmers.
que le hacía
And
al
there
doctor
was a
Juan Manuel,
question
¿cómo
made to
vincular
Dr. Juan
la
Manuel, which is
conservación in
how
situ
to
con la
link the
conservación in
on-site
situ? Y
conservation
ese
with
es un
the
gran reto
off-site
y esa es la
conservation. And
colaboración
this is a big
precisamente
challenge.
de
And that is the
sensibilizar a los
collaboration of
investigadores con los
creating
productores que juntos
awareness and
podemos hacer ese trabajo.
researchers
En el
and
caso del
producers that we
cacao
can
que
do this
debemos
work together.
forzosamente
In the
mantener el
case of
árbol
cocoa, that
es un
we
gran
must
reto. Yo no lo puedo llevar
maintain
a una
the tree
cámara
alive is a big challenge.
fría,
I
¿verdad?
cannot
Para
take it to a
mantener la
cold
semilla
chamber
y
to
en 10, 15, 20
maintain
años lo
the
puedo
seed,
sacar.
and then
Aquí tengo
15,
que
20 years
mantener el
later
árbol.
use it.
Entonces
Here, I have
es
to keep the
muy
tree
importante
alive.
mantener la
So it's
cultura,
very
¿verdad?
important to
Esos usos
maintain the
que se
culture,
tienen en el
to
sureste de
maintain the
México.
use that we
No
have in
pueden visualizar un
Southeast
mediodía sin la
Mexico.
taza
They
de
cannot
pozol
see
que es
one
maíz
day
con
without
cacao. Entonces,
pozol, drinking pozol,
ese
which is
tipo de
maize
usos
with
que se
cocoa, which is
promueven
corn
es
with
muy
cocoa, and they
importante, o el
drink it every day.
cascalate
So
donde
this
es
type of
maíz,
use we
cacao y
promote is
achiote.
very important. The
Entonces,
use of maize,
yo
cocoa,
creo que
and achiote, and
combinando
I think that
esas
combining these
necesidades que pueda tener el
needs
productor,
of the
vieron el nombre de la
farmers.
variedad que
If you saw the
sacamos
name
con
of the
mejoramiento
varietal
conservativo, se llama
we
Regalo de Dios.
obtained
El
by
productor lo
participative
propuso el nombre
breeding
porque
is
dijo,
gift of
si Dios
God. And
mandó
the
la
farmer
enfermedad,
proposed
también
that
mandó la
name
cura.
because
Se
he
va a
said,
llamar Regalo
if
de
God
Dios.
sent the
Ah,
disease,
excelente,
he'll
pues se llama
also
Regalo de
send the
Dios, ¿no?
cure.
Entonces,
So he
la
called it,
adopción
they
de
called
estos
it
materiales,
God's
pues sí
gift. So the
nos
adoption of these
permite
materials
rápidamente
allows
transferir
to
esos
very
materiales
quickly
porque la
transfer these
monilea provocó
materials
un
because
abandono.
moniliasis caused
Teníamos 10
uh,
kilos por
big
hectárea de
abandonment. We
cacao,
had 10
entonces
kg of
fue
hectare
fulminante la
of
llegada de la
cocoa, so it was
moniliasis.
very decimating moniliasis when it affected
Juan
us.
Chávez dice que tiene
Juan Chavez says that
1150
he has
accesorios cereales
1,150
en Perú. Excelente.
accessions
Perú tiene muy
viable
buen
in
material
Peru. Yes,
y
Peru
aquí
has
el
very good
reto es
material.
precisamente
And the
que los
challenge here
productores y las
is for
productoras se
producers, male and
beneficien de esa
female, to
cadena de valor
benefit
porque no podemos
from
seguir
that value
teniendo
chain because we
productores y
cannot
productoras
continue having
que están viviendo en una
farmers who are
pobreza y
living in
tenemos que la
poverty,
cadena de valor
and we have
son
that the
miles de
value
millones de
chain
dólares
is millions of
que se
dollars in that
generan en la
value
cadena de
chain that
valor
are
cacao,
generating,
chocolate y
and
tenemos
that value
productores
chain
muy
of
pobres. Entonces,
cocoa and
ese es
chocolate.
el
And we
reto
have very
del
poor
trabajo de
producers.
este
So
uso de
that's
la
part of the
diversidad
work
para
of that
promover
use
o
of
contribuir al
diversity to
equilibrio de la
promote or
cadena de valor.
contribute to the balance of that value chain.
¿Cuánto tiempo suele tomar el
How
proceso
long
desde
does
la
it
introducción
take, the
hasta la
process
adopción
from the
generalizada de una
introduction
nueva
to
variedad?
the general
Esto es
adoption of a
variable
new
si
varietal?
el
Well,
investigador
that varies.
vive
If the
a través de las
researcher
capacitaciones del
is
establecimiento
training
con el productor,
on-site training
5 o 8
with the
años
producer, it could
podemos
take
ver
in 5 to 8 years,
adopción,
we
¿verdad?
could
Ya
see
que el
that
productor
adoption
empieza
since the
a producirlo, a
producer
incrementarlo
starts
dentro de su parcela.
producing and using it in their plots.
Ha habido una respuesta positiva por
There's
parte
been
de
a
las nuevas
positive
generaciones al
response
traerse al
from new
campo.
generations and being part or going
Sí,
to the
sí ha
field. Has
habido,
there been a good reaction?
afortunadamente,
Yes,
en
there
los
has
últimos
been.
años la
Fortunately,
política
in
pública
latter
se ha
years,
centrado a la
public
transición
policies have
agroecológica, todo
focused
el manejo
on the
recuperación de los
agroecological
sistemas
transfer
agroforestales.
of the
Eso ha
management of
permitido reducir
agroforestry
costos
systems.
de
This has
producción de
allowed to
insumos
reduce
y también
production costs
revalorizar la
and
genética
supplies
del cacao
and
mexicano
revalue
hacia
the
los
genetics
chocolates
of
de alta gama
Mexican
o
cocoa
chocolates
to
gourmet.
high or
Espero que después
value
de
or
esta
gourmet
presentación
chocolates.
puedan pedir
I
que
hope that
los
after this
chocolates por arriba del
presentation, you will
75% de
request or
cacao
buy
chequen si
chocolate that
están
has over
contribuyendo bastante
75%
a los
content of
productores y
cocoa.
productoras, no solo de
Check,
México,
and this way
sino de todas
you
las zonas
could
cacauteras
help
del
the
mundo.
producers, not only in
Muchísimas
Mexico,
gracias.
but all cocoa producing countries in the world. Thank you very much.
You are on mute, Axel.
So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this interesting insights, how something from the farmer's field or that is found there can be transferred into an larger economic context. With that, we come to the next speaker from Canada now. Please, Dr. Isabelle Germain, I go ahead with your presentation.
I just would like to
Me
make
gustaría
sure that
simplemente
my
asegurarme
presentation
que mi
is
presentación
really
esté,
just showing my slides.
que puedan ver mis filminas.
Perfect. Is this
Muy
okay
bien,
for the viewers?
perfecto. Sorry.
Yeah, it's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to thank the organizers and the participants to this webinar. I'm pleased to contribute to this discussion and to build on the very informative presentations we've heard so far, and possibly add another layer to an already very challenging selection decision for specifically maize breeders. So as mentioned in introduction by Axel, from its origin in Mexico to its global role today, maize has shaped food systems for centuries. Maize has evolved into one of the world's most genetically diverse and versatile crops. Ranging across climates, cultures, and uses, maize invites us to look beyond the grain, where corn byproducts offer a powerful opportunity to better align breeding, production, and nutrition with the goals of sustainability and truly circular food systems. So before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm presently on the unceded ancestral territory of the Wabanaki Nation, whose relationship with this land continues to this day. I recognize and respect their enduring connection to this territory. So my professional background is in human nutrition. Therefore, when I study crops, I think of their potential for nutritional content, whether it is to feed animals or communities. I joined Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, AAFC, in 2017. And in 2018, I became involved in AAFC initiatives focused on the Three Sisters crops and food processing. Since 2022, my work has aligned with AEFC's new strategic plan for science, particularly areas related to increasing the reliance of agroecosystems and advancing the circular economy through value-added opportunities for foods. In parallel, I'm also involved in research supporting the optimization of northern cultivars, and we help growers select cultivars based on their nutritional composition with a focus on crops such as quinoa and naked oats. As you know, at the global level, it is more and more recognized that climate-related pressures, including rising temperatures, disrupted rainfall patterns, forest fires, and soil degradation, are placing significant stresses on current agricultural system. Insights from the study of ancient civilization offers valuable pathways for addressing some of these challenges. One well-known example is the use of biochar practiced by Egyptians, Greek, Roman, and Amazonian societies to improve soil fertility and long-term productivity. In a similar way, the Three Sisters polycropping system represent an agricultural model designed to sustain human populations, enhance soil health, and permit population to function largely without domesticated livestock. With a few regional exceptions, like the presence of wild turkey or indirect attraction of bush meat by the crops, this system demonstrates how integrated cropping strategies can support resilient and sustainable food systems, from soil to food to traditional medicine, or even insulation or toys. Before moving further, I would like to pause and acknowledge a perspective that provides important context for how we think about sustainability and circularity. This quote from Carol Ann Hilton, an Ishkwat member of the Nuu-chah-nulth Nation from the west coast of Vancouver in Canada, mentions that actually, they are a powerful, my apologies, they are a powerful reminder that many of the concepts we discussed today, such as circular economy, regenerative systems, and social impact, are not new. They are deeply rooted in indigenous economies, which are fundamentally based on relationships, reciprocity, and long-term stewardship, rather than solely on monetary exchanges. This perspective strongly resonates with how we are re-examining our food and agricultural systems today. Let's learn from the past. When we look at crops such as maize through a circular food system lens, we begin to move beyond a purely commodity-based view towards one grounded in relationships between crops and ecosystems, producers, and processors for food, feed, and also their byproducts. The Three Sisters system is currently studied as a scientifically robust model of diversified, resilient, and nutrition-oriented agroecology. Building on this foundation, can ongoing genetic analysis also be leveraged to optimize the nutritional quality for both animal and human health, including the bioactive components such as antioxidants, while at the same time minimizing waste and supporting circular food systems? Corn and corn byproducts offer a concrete example of how value can be retained, shared, and regenerated across the system rather than extracted and discarded. In this way, modern circular approaches echo principles that have been long embedded in indigenous food systems, minimizing waste, maximizing use, and designing systems that are resilient, relational, and regenerative. In 2015, colleagues at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada initiated research on the Three Sisters cropping system with a primary focus on seed preservation, agronomic practices, and food use. Over time, however, this work expanded as additional knowledge emerged from community engagement, historical records, and interdisciplinary research. These insights highlighted not only the nutritional significance of the Three Sister crops across diverse communities, but also their broader cultural importance, including spiritual and medicinal dimensions. This evolution in understanding has enforced the value of viewing these cropping systems through a more holistic lens, one that integrates agriculture, nutrition, and cultural knowledge. As our work progressed, it became clear that crop residues were not only used to fertilize the soil. In resource-limited contexts, every part of the plant was intentionally valued and optimized, reflecting a deeply circular and efficient use of biomass. Publications have documented the nutritional content of corn kernels of various cultivars and regions. Therefore, I will not go along the line of presenting all of this data. But we know that the corn kernels provide 70 to 75% of carbohydrates and fibers, 8 to 10% of proteins, and 3 to 5% of fats. We also know that corn kernels provide vitamin B1, B3, folate, as well as iron, phosphorus, and magnesium. We also learned that preparation and cooking approaches enhances the availability of these nutrients. More recently, bioactive compounds such as carotenoids, phenolic compounds, and phytosterols were also measured. We know that pigmentation in corn is closely linked to the presence and concentration of specific bioactive compounds. Kernel color often reflects the accumulation of secondary metabolites that play both physiological and nutritional roles. So carotenoids, for example, are primarily responsible for the yellow and orange pigmentation in corn kernels, and these compounds include lutein and zeaxanthin, function as antioxidants, and are associated with eyes and metabolic health, for example. Phenolic compounds on their side, such as anthocyanins, contribute to blue, purple, red, and black pigmentation. These molecules are potent antioxidants and are involved in plant stress protection and defense mechanism. Yield and compositional traits are shaped by the interaction between genotype, growing environment, and agronomic practices. Looking ahead, there's an opportunity to expand this framework by more fully integrating nutritional quality into how we define crop value, exploring how both quantity and resilience, as well as compositional and functional attributes of corn kernels, can together inform breeding properties, management strategies, and value creations across the food systems. To better illustrate how nutritional composition has been used in the past for selection, I would like to share an example from work that my team has conducted over the past several years. So this case focuses on naked oats, a crop primarily used in elite equestrian setting. Because naked oat grows without an external hull, they generate approximately 30% less processing residues. Although it is an ancient grain, naked oats is only now being reconsidered for human consumptions. From a nutritional perspective, naked oats are relatively high in monosaturated fats, which raise concerns about their susceptibility to rapid oxidation. Breeders were interested in understanding the fatty acid profiles of several cultivars over a 3-year period, and those cultivars were specifically designed for northern context. Building on this work, we are now conducting oxidation studies. Also, through this research, we have gained insights into the plant's natural self-protection mechanisms, which involve bioactive compounds known as anthonithramides. This has allowed our collaborators to select low residue cultivars based on specific markets for foods and also pharmaceutical derivative products. I apologize. So this broader perspective becomes particularly relevant when we consider how maize biomass is currently utilized. For human consumption, the edible portion, the kernels, represent only about 30 to 45% of the above ground biomass. In contrast, when used in ruminant system, up to 80 to 90% of the above ground biomass can be valorized through whole plant utilization. These numbers highlight a significant opportunity to rethink how value is generated along the entire plant continuum. They invite future research to explore how genetic, agronomic, and compositional traits can support not only yield and resilience, but also nutritional quality and functional value across food, feed, and circular bioeconomy applications. Inspired by my readings, one compelling example of residue valorization is the potential of corn silk, which is often overlooked. Traditionally considered a byproduct, corn silk has been shown to contain bioactive compound, including phenolics and antioxidants, and has a long history of use in traditional medicine. Emerging evidence from recent reviews suggests that corn silk contains a diverse range of bioactive compounds that may contribute to physiological effects, although the underlying mechanisms and consistency across population remains to be fully characterized. These findings highlight the research potential of corn silk as an understudied maize byproduct and support further investigation into its phytochemical profile, functional properties, and possible roles in nutrition-focused and circular bioeconomy applications. This also highlights how components typically regarded as waste can represent untapped nutritional, functional, and economic value when viewed through a circular and integrative lens. A 2023 review also confirmed that corn silk is a chemically rich, genetically underexplored tissue with reported biological activity, underscoring the need to integrate non-kernel traits into future maize genetic research. Also, this review by Ramirez and Esperanza and colleagues synthesize current knowledge on maize byproducts as chemically rich yet underutilized resources, highlighting that more than half of the maize plant consists of residues containing diverse bioactive compounds. It shows that bioactive profiles vary strongly by tissue, pigmentation, genotype, and plant structure, with bound phenolic compounds playing a central role in the residues. While numerous antioxidant and health-related activities have been reported, most evidence remains exploratory. The authors emphasize that future progress depends on integrated approach, linking genetics, agronomy, plant biology, and circular bioeconomy frameworks to revalorize the whole maize plant rather than focusing on grain alone. In the Three Sisters system, agricultural waste is redefined through a full plant utilization where husk, stalks, silks, and other plant components are recognized as valuable outputs for food, medicine, materials, and soil regeneration. Corn silk, for example, contains bioactive compounds with nutraceutical potential, illustrating how the system maintains biological resources at their highest functional value. Keep in mind, similar untapped knowledge exists also for squash and beans, whose secondary plant parts and traditional use remain far less documented despite their ecological, nutritional, and cultural significance within the polyculture. Treating all of these outputs as co-products rather than residues has the potential to reshape environmental impacts allocation, value chains, and sustainability assessments in integrated food systems. Current research on Three Sisters seek to understand how indigenous polyculture systems achieve productivity, resilience, and sustainability through biological complementaries, while simultaneously enhancing soil health, reducing inputs, conserving biodiversity, and strengthening food sovereignty by valuing all plant components as interconnected co-products. Building on this foundation, future research on Three Sisters offer a particularly rich opportunity for interdisciplinary collaboration. Extending beyond productivity and resilience, I wish to suggest that new research could explore how different agronomic scenarios influence the overall nutritional composition of both kernels and byproducts, and bring greater scientific attention to the less documented use of corn byproducts. I believe this is the tip of the iceberg of knowledge, and such work would deepen our understanding of how biological complementaries translate into not only sustainable yields, but also into enhanced nutritional value and circular valorization across the entire plant. Perhaps also become part of the selection process for certain breeders, growers, and also communities. In closing, research on the Three Sisters whole plant and byproduct valorization is undeniably complex, ranging from agronomy, genetics, nutrition, and sustainability. Yet it is precisely this complexity that makes it such a promising and necessary area for future research, collaboration, and innovation. By embracing system-level thinking and integrating diverse knowledge sources alongside indigenous perspective, we have the opportunity to generate solutions that are both scientifically robust and relevant for future generations. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention and invite your questions in the chat.
Thank you, Dr. Germain, for opening our minds for uses that are really not as broadly known there, based also on your specific knowledge about the chemical background there. If other questions, other questions to Dr. Germain in the chat, if they are in Spanish, I can't read them. I don't know whether any of the translators can.
I can send you the translation, Axel.
Uh-huh. How do you send it to me? As a chat or?
Yes, for you in the chat.
Okay. I didn't get any in the chat, or maybe I don't know how to use it properly.
I can read it for Dr. Germain.
Please, Please.
Yeah, Luis is asking, could you give specific examples of products or ingredients derived from corn bioproducts that are already on the market?
Yes, actually, corn silk is now sold as tea and is used in certain contexts for medicinal purposes. However, strong scientific support for these products remains to be clearly established, but teas are being sold on the market right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's good. Maybe there will be more questions when we come to the general discussion. So with that, we come to the last presenter in this second half, and that is Dr. Aida Kebede from Agriculture Canada in Ottawa. Dr. Kebede has increased last year germplasm from our collection. We are located in Saskatoon. Our climate is not conducive for corn, or it's difficult. So thank you for that. And with that, Dr. Kebede, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Axel, for the nice introduction. Can anyone tell me that everything, you can see the screen and everything?
Yeah, that's
Perfect.
okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Aida Kabada, and I am with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, based at Ottawa Research and Development Center. Today, I'll be talking about how we are advancing Canada's corn genetic resources through germplasm development. Our work supports breeding innovations, maize growers, and help address emerging challenges such as climate variability and disease pressures. To begin, AFC operates a national network of 17 research and development centers across Canada. And the Ottawa Research and Development Center, that is where our program is based, focuses on maize germplasm development among other crops. We also do germplasm development for barley, soybean, oats, and wheat in the centers. So this national structure allows us to integrate research across diverse agroecological zones, which is also essential for developing broadly adapted germplasm. So maize is a major crop in Canada and represents the third most valuable cereal after wheat and barley. This contributes approximately 2 billion annually at the farm gate, with about 50 million tons produced across 1.3 million hectares. Production is concentrated mainly in Ontario and Quebec, which is about 90%, but also extends into Manitoba. Importantly, maize supports a wide range of stakeholders, from breeders and farmers to livestock producers, biofuel industries, and food processors. So improving maize germplasm has both economic and food system implications here in Canada. So our program is aligned with AFC priorities, focusing on innovation, sustainability, and stewardship of genetic resources. So we aim to develop elite inbred lines adapted to short season environments, enhance genetic diversity, improve resilience to climate stress and diseases. And this aligns with the broader mission, such as the climate adaptation, agroecological resilience, and digital transformation of agriculture Our ultimate goal is to deliver science that has real world impact. Our germplasm development builds over 100 years of public maize improvement in Canada. We investigate diverse genetic sources, including the US Corn Belt, the European Flint, and the much distant one, but still valuable, is the tropical lines from Summit. These sources contribute complementary traits. The US Corn Belt provides yield and adaptation, and the European Flint, cold tolerance, and from tropical materials, diversity and disease resistance. The breeding pipeline begins with parental selection and progress through line development, evaluation, testing, and eventual release. So in our pipeline, we use both conventional and double haploid technology to develop inbred lines. The double haploid significantly accelerates inbred development from 5 to 7 from the conventional down to 2 to 3 years. Our focus is on developing publicly available inbred lines for grain production and specialty markets, such as the use of stock juice for production of biofuels. So this ensures that our outputs are accessible and benefit the broader industry. So at the evaluation stage, we focus on key traits for Canadian environment. These include disease resistance, especially Gibberella erot, tar spot, and Gossa's wilt, and early maturity and cold tolerance. Spring is very cold here, and fast kernel dry down. So we use donors such as the CO441. This is a Gibberella erot resistant material to develop Gibberella erot resistant materials, and the CML495 is an inbred from Summit that has good resistance to tar spot that we are trying to bring into Canadian adapted materials. And we use combined disease nurseries and marker-assisted selections to bring in those traits. And like for example, the tar spot QTL that has been detected by CIMMYT colleagues, that's the one that we are using for marker-assisted selection, backcrossing to create some inbred lines that are adapted to the Canadian environment. So integration of phenotyping and molecular tools is essential for our success. So the next step, we evaluate the combining ability through hybrid testing. New inbred lines are crossed with testers from opposite heterotic groups. Usually those are commercial testers that we use, and could be stiff stock or non-stiff stock, depending on what the new inbred is, so that we can be able also to maximize the hybrid vigor that we get to see. These hybrids are evaluated across multiple environments over multiple years. Usually it's 3 years that we evaluate them over multiple locations, and then based on the performance, we select the ones that are best. So this step ensures that new inbreds have real value in hybrid development when breeding companies or any other interested party would like to take those inbred lines and use them in their breeding programs. So once we validate that the elite material or the elite inbred or the inbred is ready, we release it, and then we announce the inbred line. We have a new inbred line, and at AFC we have developed and maintained over 500 corn inbred lines that we have developed throughout the years. And these have been characterized for combining ability, disease resistance, and some of them already have molecular profiles published in 2011 by Reed. But we are currently trying to expand that to cover all the inbred lines we currently have, all the 500 of them, genotype them so that we can have molecular profiles. And these resources are made publicly available through AFC database and licensing agreements supporting both public and private breeding sectors. So our program operates within a strong national collaborative framework. We work with public institutions like universities, both local here in Canada and outside, provincial organizations, private companies such as Corteva and local Canadian one, Maize. We also conduct multi-site testing across Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba. And this collaborative model ensures that our germplasm is robust, widely adapted, and relevant to the industry needs of the country. A key priority for us is broadening the genetic base. We incorporate exotic germplasm to expand adaptation and resilience using genotyping tools like genotyping by sequencing or GBS. We map diversity and identify useful alleles that are responsible for particular traits that we are interested in. And combined with disease screening and marker-assisted breeding, this approach strengthens long-term genetic gain and sustainability. So our program has delivered several key achievements. Inbred lines with reduced Gibberella ear rot severity and on accumulation. Our most recent inbred line is the CO483 for this trait. Improved kernel dry down. CO484 is our newest inbred that is added. And for cereal corn or extremely early material and dwarf maize. That one is CO485. And we also have the first publicly available haploid inducer or for the double haploid breeding technology that we're using. That one is CO486. So these outputs directly support breeding efficiency, crop performance, and adaptation to Canadian environments. So we also emphasize knowledge mobilization through partnership with universities, private sector partners, international organizations like CIMMYT. And through this collaboration, we can support training, innovation, and capacity building across the maize research community. We help in educating highly qualified personnel or PhD or master's students as well. So looking ahead, our priorities include further broadening the genetic base, develop climate resilient, early maturing, disease-resistant inbreds, and we would like to integrate multi-omics and artificial intelligence or AI-driven selections. And these efforts will help us respond to increasing climate variability and evolving disease pressures. So to summarize, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's germplasm development program plays a critical role in Canadian maize innovation system. Public inbred development drives sustainability and support industry advancement. And maintaining genetic diversity is essential for long-term resilience. Finally, I would like to acknowledge all our collaborators and partners, including universities, producer groups, and industry partners. And this contribution are essential to the success of the program. And our current project is funded by the Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership, which is a relationship, which is a 50-50 cost share between the Government of Canada and the grower groups, which are represented by the Canadian Field Crop Research Alliance. And yeah, that's all I have for today. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kebede. Very
Gracias,
interesting
doctora Kibida. Muy interesante.
to hear of the transmission from genetic resources also through providing these inbreeding lines to breeders that pick them up for our Canadian environment. I see there's a question to you, or maybe more. Shall I read them to you? I see. I don't know whether I get it right. The first one from Alberto. I can't see the full family name full. Can you share XPVP inbred lines like the USDA does?
We don't privatize the inbred lines. They are freely, publicly available to anyone who's interested in getting them.
And I think you explained that there will be then kind of agreements that you make. You don't put them into
Yes.
our gene banks. We don't have them in the public Canadian gene bank, but they would have to approach your program there and then
Yes.
figure the conditions out there. But they are accessible. Yes.
They can directly communicate with me by email,
Yeah.
and I will facilitate the agreement signing, and then they can have those inbred lines for any research or breeding activity that they want to do with it.
Good, thank you. There's a question. Dear Dr. Meras Diaz, that's, I don't know. To Dr. Meras Diaz, I don't know. Thank you for your question. Yeah, that comes from Isabel Germain. I read it now. Yeah. Here's a more complete of the answer. That's an answer. Okay, it's not a question there. Sorry. And that's also an answer. No, I don't see another question in the chat. If I overlooked a specific question to Dr. Kebede, please go ahead or raise your hand. Here's a question for Aida Kebede. How can, it comes from Karina Vian, and sorry, I can't see the full name there. How can crop diversity be maintained while improving food system efficiency and livelihoods? That's a complex question, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the diversity we're trying to conserve is within the inbred lines, because our inbred lines are curated from different parts of the world, from tropical lines and from the US and from European corn belt, from European flint. So they are, I would say, quite diverse compared to the US corn belt materials, because they have a lot of additions in them. But in terms of diversity compared to the tropical materials, for sure, they are not comparable.
Yes, that's very interesting. And what is, of course, we notice also from the presentations given, the systems of agriculture in our countries, when you go from Mexico to Canada, they change a lot, right? So the way of livelihoods or how that is defined, how it looks, is also very different. Right? So it's a very complex question. We could probably talk a lot about that, but whatever you do, it's based on diversity there, I think. I don't know, did I overlook another question specifically to Dr. Kebede?
So there is one more.
Yeah.
It says, have you worked in plant breeding with QPM inbreed lines to improve amino acids content in the grain?
Most of the inbred lines we develop here, and their use is for animal feed and for industry processes. So we haven't worked specifically with QPM. Those kind of experiments are usually, I think, done by CIMMYT for human consumption corn products. Ours mostly goes to animal feed, so no.
Good. If there are no more specific questions to Dr. Kebede, then we can go to the next agenda items, which is a general question and answer session. Now, I can't follow the chat or pick them from the chat what was not answered, but if a question was not answered or there is a question in the room, please raise your hand or put it in the chat. And maybe I take the liberty of starting with one question. I have a question for Dr. Mahan. When we heard about how they operate the big germplasm collections and in the USDA, my question is, how do you handle F1 hybrid lines? I understand you have the rule, things are made accessible after a while, but most of the modern cultivars are F1 hybrids, right? So does that mean the F1 hybrid is made available, and how would you maintain it anyhow? Or does it mean that the underlying inbreeding lines are deposited in the USDA?
Yeah, good question. So most of the time, when things are deposited to us, they are as the inbred lines. We do occasionally have examples where F1 hybrids, commercial hybrids, are submitted to the collection, and we do have seed of those in our backup location, but we do not distribute or maintain as a hybrid. We will distribute the parents. So the two parents of that hybrid would be the ones that be distributed, and then people would, have to reconstitute that hybrid themselves. Because to your point, we would just have to constantly remake it, right? And that's just not really in our mission area. So
That's very interesting to hear. So it's very interesting to hear that even the developers agree to that, right? That they
if
make
they so
these.
in the US, if they apply for a plant variety protection certificate, then that's what they're agreeing to, is that
Yes.
in 20 years' time, their material will become public. Some companies instead will do patents. And if you patent material, that material right now does not come to the collections. So that's the distinction. That's the difference.
Very interesting. Yeah, thank you. In Canada, I can add to that, it's a voluntary process we encourage, but depositing released registered cultivars even after registration expires is on a voluntary base in Canada. That's a difference.
Yeah.
Any other questions? There are maybe Spanish questions that I am missing. Maybe the translators can help if I'm overlooking something there.
From Kenya, it says, what practices do you recommend for the conservation of native
So we have
seeds
here a
at
few
producer level.
questions. I'm not sure for who of you. So you, whatever you want, you can speak. There are three questions. I'm reading it. I'm reading them together. It's what practices do you recommend for preserving native seeds at the producer level? How can small-scale farmers protect their varieties from hybrid or genetically modified crops? And finally, what are the main threats to the diversity of native corn?
So that was a lot there. I will try to tackle the first couple, and then I'll need a repeat on the third one. So as far as trying to protect from foreign pollen, essentially, that second question was asking about. That's a real challenge. I know. For us, what we do if we were to have an open pollinated increase here in Iowa, we would have what's called isolation. So physical distance between our corn and any other corn. So we would plant our corn inside a field of maybe soybean, glycine max, and then we'd have a physical distance barrier. I understand as a farmer, you don't control what another farmer next to you grows, so that can be challenging. As far as how to keep up seed amounts for on a producer scale, um, again, use isolation. If it's open pollinated and you have isolation, then it's easier, right? You can let nature pollinate. Otherwise, if it's a native, more land race material, and you don't have the luxury of physical isolation, then you would have to hand pollinate like we do and sibling mate, different tassels to different ears, which is at a producer's level is going to be pretty challenging for sure. And Camino, do you mind hitting that third question one more time from Kenya?
Yeah, sure. The third one was, what are the main threats to the diversity of native corn?
Threats?
The main threats.
Yeah, sorry.
Maybe I'll let Juan, I'll throw you under the bus. Do you want to answer this one if you're around there? Juan Manuel?
Sí, mire, en México el
Oh,
ochenta
yes,
por
yes. In
ciento de los
Mexico,
maíces cultivados en
80% of
agricultores
maize that is
es
bred
maíz
by
nativo criollo.
farmers is native
Acá en México no
maize.
está
Here in
permitida la
Mexico,
siembra de
it's
transgénicos.
not allowed to
Entonces,
plant
prácticamente
transgenics.
la amenaza
So pretty
para
much a
un maíz
threat
nativo
to
serían
native
maíces
maize would
mejorados
be
que se pudieran
a
sembrar contiguos
inbred
a
maize,
los
or
maíces nativos.
that could be
Pero
produced
generalmente
next
los
to
lugares donde
native maize.
siembran
But
maíces
generally,
nativos
where native
no
maize is
hay muchos
produced,
maíces
there's
mejorados que
not very
puedan
many
usarse con ellos. Y
bred
generalmente
maize where
también
there could
una
be
práctica que se
a
puede hacer
crossbreeding.
es
Another
que si
practice
existen maíces
is if
alrededor
there
de
is any maize
de estos cultivos,
surrounding these native
la semilla
crops,
que utilizan los
the
agricultores
seed that is
puede
used by the
recolectarse del
farmers
centro de las
can
parcelas o de
can be used from the
los
center
lugares
of
donde
the
se siembra.
plots
De esta
or
manera
or
se
where it's
evitan que
planted,
pueda
and
haber el
this way
crecimiento de
you
estos
can prevent
materiales.
this
Por otra
crossbreeding
parte,
of the
los maíces
material.
que utilizan
On the other hand, the
tienen
maize used by
características que
these
ellos
farmers have
le dan un valor especial, ¿no?
characteristics that they give a
Unas pueden ser
special value
fácilmente
to.
detectables con
They
la
cannot
textura
be
del grano, color
easily
del grano y forma
detected
de la
with the
cáscara.
texture of
Entonces,
the
para hacer
grain
sus
and
siembras,
the plant.
ya ellos
So
hacen una
for
selección
their
de estos
next year
materiales.
planting, they
De esta
select
manera,
the material.
aseguran
And this way they ensure, not completely, but they ensure in a high level to have the material they have preserved forever. So this is a way in which we can still find maize that is very typical of certain races. The other thing is if any farmer plants inbred hybrid maize that they use for sale, commercial, industrial use. And what they keep is their own native maize, is what they keep. So this is one way they protect native maize, or you can protect native maize here in Mexico.
Thank you. I allow now to jump in with also a question to Dr. Juan Manuel Hernandez Casillas. It was very interesting to hear that from you, you said 80% of the land bases, 80% is still land bases, and the material you have in your collection that was collected 20 years or how many years ago is still, you can still find it on the farms, you told. Have you ever done a comparison of the material you have in your gene bank with the same material you would find today on the farms? So is there any differences in the material you preserved, a land waste you preserved in your gene bank for many years? Is there a difference to the material that you find of the same land waste when it was continuously grown by the farmers?
Sí. Sí, hay algunos estudios
Well, yes, there are
no, no
some
han hecho
studies,
muchos para
not
comparar
very many
maíces que se
comparison
hayan colectado, por
studies to
ejemplo, en
compare
los años
maize that
50
was collected,
con
for instance, in the
maíces de
50s
esta época.
with
Bueno,
a current
aquí hay un dato
production
interesante.
maize. There's some interesting data,
Los
though.
primeros híbridos que se
The
desarrollaron
first
en
hybrids
México
that were developed in
fueron
Mexico
con muy pocas
were with
autofecundaciones.
very little
Esto era
self or
generalmente,
inbreeding,
bueno,
and this
autofecundaciones
was
heterolíneas. Esto era básicamente
inline
para
line
amortiguar los
inbreeding. This is
cambios
pretty much to
climáticos en toda la zona,
compensate climate change,
sacrificando un poco
uh,
el rendimiento. Pero
sacrificing
los
the yield
agricultores
pretty much.
mexicanos
But
son
Mexican
curiosos por
farmers,
naturaleza.
they're very
Si un
curious
agricultor
by nature.
tiene su maíz
If a
y luego
farmer
va
has
con
its
su
maize
vecino a
and
otros
they go to
lugares
their
y ve un
neighbor or they
maíz que
go
se le hace
elsewhere and
interesante,
they see interesting
agarra
maize,
dos,
what they
tres o
do,
cuatro
they
macizos
take
o
two,
bien
three, or
los
four
obtiene por
corns
familiares y
and
los siembra, pero no
they
los
take
siembra
it, they share with their
excesivamente, sino
relatives,
tener
and they plant
dos
it. Not
surcos
extensively.
y los
They
observa.
plant a
Si es
couple plants and
interesante,
they
si le gusta,
watch.
lo
If it's
incorpora
interesting, if
a
they
sus
like it,
maíces,
they'll include
pero
it in their
siempre y
own
cuando
maize. But
mantengan las
as long as they
características
maintain the
con los que él
characteristics
mantiene
for
su
which
maíz,
he
como puede ser bueno para atole, bueno
maintains his own
para
maize, if it's good
las
for
tortillas y
atole,
todo,
which is a
o que le
drink, if it's good
añada
for
otra
tortillas,
característica como
or
puede
that
ser
it adds another
resistencia a la daño,
characteristics, for
resistencia
instance,
a plagas y enfermedades.
resistance to pests
Entonces,
and disease.
la comparación de estos
So the
materiales
comparison
sí
of these
existe,
materials does
sí hay,
exist,
y
and
generalmente los
there
maíces
are, in general
recientes
terms,
tienen
with
una mayor
recent
productividad
maize has a greater
que los maíces
productivity
antiguos,
compared to
pero
the
siempre
older
tratando
maize,
de conservar
but
las
always
características por
trying
los que
to
fueron seleccionados.
conserve the
Entonces,
characteristics for which they were
yo creo
chosen
que los
initially.
maíces
So I believe that maize
mejorados,
in
híbridos o variedades mejoradas, en
inbred or
alguna
bred or
manera
improved
están contribuyendo
bred
a
maize are
aumentar
contributing
ciertas
somehow
características como
to
puede ser
improve
rendimiento
certain characteristics such
sanitario
as
de los
yield, for
maíces
instance,
que se conservan
health of the maize
80
that
y
is
tantos
conserved,
por
that
ciento que
80
registra
or
México.
80
Creo
something
que sí
percent that is still
contribuyen
there. So I think they do contribute to that, and farmers do maintain that type of maize. But if we compare what we have in the bank with what is actually in crops, there's two or three studies that have shown that recent maize is more productive, but
Thank
with
you.
many characteristics of the old maize.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. I take the liberty to ask another question to Dr. Germain, if you are still there, Isabel. And my question is, you talked about a little bit a more holistic approach there. At the same time, you look at nutritious components from a very, I would say, westernized or standard scientific study there. But my question is, could you see any differences given a certain line, given a certain way, right? If it's produced in the Three Sisters way, does the corn show different properties than if you would grow it only as a pure line and maintain it and study it, maybe in the same environment? So is there any interaction between or coming from the systems as that you can even, or how does it play out from the chemical side?
We are starting to analyze certain data that we have obtained from a 3-year study. I cannot divulge any of the results at this point, unfortunately, but it was our key question. We know that there are different ways of looking at this question. We can look at the soil per se, but we were very interested in what was happening nutritionally speaking, and the results are promising. So this also opens the door to several potential, even extrapolating data that will need to be done, because every trio will have its own impact. And therefore, instead of starting with the analysis of the grain, perhaps we need to go back to the needs of the community and the needs of the market to see what is the breeder looking for, what is the community looking for as a nutritional component of focus, and then moving backwards to what we need to put together to optimize this result. Because every trio of the Three Sisters will generate different values, and fertilizing the soils as well. So it is a complicated question to tackle, and every breeder will be different.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I don't see any. I hope I don't overlook any of the Spanish chats there. If there are no more questions, then maybe I start with the wrap up from my end, and then Dr. Kotari will speak, and Dr. Hernandez Casillas will close. I want to thank Pocio Norte for organizing this or helping with this, and I want to thank the speakers very much. I think we heard a lot. We heard from Dr. Mahan about the challenges in the gene bank, very honestly. Tolza gave us insights with variety and so on. We heard from Dr. Hernandez Casillas about the very interesting on-farm side evolution ongoing in Mexico. We heard from Dr. Avendo Arrastre also about variety registration, even of lines that were picked up from farmers' fields. So also an interesting approach. From Dr. Isabelle Germain, we learned that a very broad understanding a very broad understanding is really required in more thinking in systems. From Dr. Kebede, we learned how important, also in the Canadian context, and how different it is when it comes to the farmers here in Canada. The question we have is whether it would be worse, maybe in the context of our Nordgene task force, to continue to do something on corn. And I think the three of us, we will have discussions on that, but we invite comments in that regard. With that, I pass for the wrap up to Dr. Kotari.
Yeah, thank you, Axel. That was a really good summary. I'm grateful for the task force. I'm also grateful to Professor Norte, and all of the presentations today were fantastic. A lot to learn there. Um, it's a good reminder, right? Given our recent conversations of the strength we have in the collaboration that we share. So advancing this type of work is crucial. I hope it has been beneficial to all the people attending. Feedback would also be wonderful here. The questions were very interesting. It was a constant flow. It's a very good reflection of the value that these sessions have in our trilateral contribution to science. So yes, Axel and I and Juan Manuel will go back and think of unique and creative ways to continue our work here, create room for more growth and germplasm exchange, and see where our future can be in achieving some of our common goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Neha. Manuel, please, a final word.
Bien, yo creo que según las preguntas
Yes, I think that
las
according to all the
comentarios y todo,
questions and
vemos
comments
que
and
nuestros tres
everything,
países
we can
tienen
see that in our
características
three
muy
countries have
particulares,
very
pero
specific
que nos debe
characteristics,
unir la
but these
necesidad
should,
de
what should bring
conocer,
us together is
de
the need to
estudiar, de
learn more,
seleccionar
to
y de
research, to
utilizar el
study, to
germoplasma
select, and to
que
use
resguardamos.
germplasm that
Creo
we
que
are
los esfuerzos
safeguarding. I
son
think that the
diferentes en nuestros
efforts are
países y
different in
nuestros
our
puntos de
countries.
vista.
Our
Si alcanzamos
viewpoints are
a verlos
different.
un tanto diferentes
If
todos,
if if
apuntan
we
hacia una
if these are a bit
conservación,
different, they
estudio y
do point
utilización del
towards
metaplancton.
conservation
Y eso
study
es
and
lo que
conservation
deberíamos
of
de
this
buscar
germplasm, and
dentro de
that's what
nuestros
we
países
should
para
pursue in our
impulsar
countries to
puntos de interés que
promote
nos unan.
these points of
Creo
interest
que
that
si
bring us
buscamos o
together.
si
I believe that
rebuscamos por ahí,
if
podemos
we
encontrar algo en
research,
lo
I'm
cual
sure we can
podamos
find
trabajar
things we can
conjuntamente.
work together with.
Gracias.
And once again, thank you.
Good, thank you very much. I don't know, maybe Camino. I see also we get an invitation here from Simit to maybe reach out there in the chat. Camino, perhaps you want to close the meeting for us? Thank you.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. This is all for now. We are sharing the recordings, the authorized presentations, and we can help you to connect with some of the speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.